It was a cold, grey morning in a quiet Chicago suburb when Ethan Cole unlocked the rusty door of his old repair shop, Cole's Auto and Service. The fluorescent lights flickered above his head as the scent of motor oil and steel filled the air. He took a long sip of his black coffee, staring at the final notice letter lying on his counter. His savings were gone, the bills were piling up, and customers were scarce. Once this shop had been his father's pride, a place where locals trusted him to fix anything with wheels. Now it was barely surviving. Ethan sighed, picked up a wrench and whispered, "Come on, old girl. One more month." Just as he began organizing his tools, the deep hum of an engine caught his attention. A sleek black limousine rolled to a stop in front of his garage, a vehicle far too expensive for this rundown part of town. The doors opened, and a tall, elegant woman stepped out. She wore a long beige coat and dark sunglasses that couldn't hide the stress in her eyes. "Are you open?" she asked, her voice sharp and impatient. Ethan wiped his hands on his rag and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "What seems to be the trouble?" Behind her, a small girl about 7 years old was sitting in a wheelchair, her legs wrapped in a pink blanket. Her bright eyes met Ethan's, and she offered a shy smile. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Lily." Ethan knelt beside her, returning the smile. "Nice to meet you, Lily. I'm Ethan. Don't worry, we'll get you back on the road soon." He noticed the woman glance at her watch, clearly in a hurry. "Please," she said curtly, "I need the car fixed immediately. I have an important meeting downtown." Ethan nodded again and got to work. The engine was complicated, a luxury model with electronic issues and a cracked belt. As Ethan worked, Lily quietly watched him from her chair, swinging a small stuffed bear on her lap. "You fix cars every day?" she asked curiously. "Pretty much," Ethan said, smiling as he tightened a bolt. "They don't talk much, but they tell me what's wrong in their own way." Lily giggled, then frowned when her wheelchair made a loud squeak as she tried to adjust it. Ethan paused, glancing over. "That thing's seen better days, huh?" She shrugged. "It's old. Mum says she'll get me a new one when she has time." Her words were innocent, but they hit Ethan harder than he expected. By late afternoon, Ethan had the limousine running perfectly again. The woman returned from a phone call visibly relieved. "How much?" she asked, pulling out her wallet. Ethan hesitated. "Just pay for the parts. The labor's on me." The woman raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" He nodded. "You've got enough to worry about." Without another word, she paid and left. But that night, long after closing time, Ethan stayed in his shop. He couldn't stop thinking about the little girl and that squeaky chair. Under the hum of his desk lamp, he began taking apart spare bike parts and old car components, shaping, welding, and painting. By dawn, sitting in the corner of his shop was a brand-new wheelchair, sleek, silver, and smooth. On the back, he screwed a small metal plate that read, "Made with Care, EC." 3 days later, Ethan was tightening bolts under an old pickup truck when a familiar SUV pulled up in front of his shop. He wiped the grease from his hands, thinking it was just another customer, but when the door opened, his heart skipped a beat. It was the same elegant woman, Veronica Hale, though this time she wasn't wearing designer heels or hiding behind sunglasses. She looked softer, calmer, almost nervous. In her hands she held a folded newspaper. Ethan stood uncertain. "Something wrong with the car again?" he asked politely. Veronica shook her head slowly. "No, Mr. Cole, I came here to thank you." She unfolded the newspaper and handed it to him. Ethan frowned, his hands trembling slightly as he read the headline, "Local Mechanic Builds Custom Wheelchair for Billionaire's Daughter. Refuses Payment." Below the headline was a picture of Lily, beaming as she rode her new silver chair through the park. Her joy was radiant. Ethan blinked, struggling to process what he was seeing. "How did they—" he began, but Veronica cut him off, her voice shaking. "Lily couldn't stop talking about you. About how kind you were. The reporters found out on their own. I didn't plan for this to happen." She paused, tears forming in her eyes. "I just needed to see you again." Ethan didn't know what to say. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "I'm just glad she liked it," he said quietly. But before he could say more, Veronica stepped closer and suddenly wrapped her arms around him. Ethan froze, surprised. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Lily hasn't smiled like that in years. She lost her father in an accident, and ever since then, nothing seemed to bring her joy. But when she rolled into my office with that new chair, laughing and spinning, I realized something." She stepped back, her eyes glistening. "You gave her back something I couldn't. Happiness." Veronica reached into her purse and pulled out a thick white envelope. Ethan immediately shook his head. "No, ma'am. I don't want any payment. I didn't do it for money." She smiled softly. "It's not a payment, Ethan. It's an opportunity." She handed it to him anyway. Inside was a check for $500,000 and a letter with the Hale Foundation's golden seal. As Ethan read, his eyes widened. The letter offered him the position of head engineer for a new project called Heart of Steel, a foundation dedicated to designing affordable mobility devices for children across the country. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at her, speechless. "Why me?" he asked finally. Veronica smiled. "Because people like you remind the world that kindness still exists. Money can buy parts, but it can't rebuild a heart. You did that." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he nodded silently. That night, after she left, he stood outside his shop, looking at the glowing city skyline. The wind was cold, but his chest felt warm. Somewhere downtown, a mother was holding her daughter, both smiling. And Ethan finally realized, sometimes the smallest act of kindness can rebuild more than machines. It can rebuild lives,